And like I said, we're just going to pick up from where we left off last time, because when I saw you guys last time, we got a chance to finish up the ideas of checks and balances. Now, you have to keep in mind, there's one thing that all the founders were united in, one thing that they were all could agree upon. Do you remember what's that one thing that they're all afraid of? That it is. The one thing they're all afraid of is way too much power. Remember, I was telling you guys last time, they said, I will not trade one dictatorship for another. So Madison came up with his system to keep power limited, to keep the government small. Remember, he lists out all the things the government cannot do. One thing that he's going to design to be certain that the federal government is not too powerful is federalism. Now, we very briefly talked about this last time. So I want to talk about what it is and how this limits power. First off, federalism is simply a system that divides power between the federal government and the state governments. What federalism does is it basically takes different areas of power and assigns it to either the federal government or the state governments. Now, let me just ask you first, what might be one thing that just federal government can do? States have no power in regards to this. What do you think might be one thing that just federal can do? Just federal. Stan, what do you think? Declare war. Excellent. Federal government has that sole power to declare and fight a war. If we left that to the states, that could be a real serious problem. If we let Wyoming declare war against France, we'd have issues because Wyoming would win. But that's a whole other issue. We let the states have their own powers too. So let me just turn this. What do you think might be a power that just states have, that federal can't touch? This one's always harder. What do you think just states can do? I'll give you a hint. Hold on to that idea, because it gets weirder than that. What do you think? Yes, ma'am?
They have the power to decide what is taught in schools.
They control their own school systems. Now, the federal does have their hand in it a little bit, but one of the powers that states have is they get to run their school systems. Now, the way that this system is designed is simply to be, let states run their own affairs. The federal government is really bad at knowing individual states and individual pockets of their citizenry. States know their own people much better than the federal government does. What this federalism system does is it gives states a lot of power to do what is normal in their state. So let me ask this. Is the lovely state of Utah a little different from the state of New York? They are very, very different. So Utah's allowed to have their own laws. New York's allowed to have their own laws. Now, here in Colorado, we have our own laws, which are getting very, very bizarre at this point, because the underlying rule of federalism is states, you can make whatever laws you want. Whatever works for you is fine, as long as it doesn't go against federal law. Uh-oh. Sawyer, do we have an issue in Colorado against federal law? What is it? This is something that's really odd that we can use as a perfect example here. The Colorado marijuana law, quite literally, goes against a federal law. Does this sound like a problem? So how do we solve the problem? What could happen at any point? What do you think? Yes?
The federal government is allowed to come here at any point and shut them down, like shut down the pot shops.
And start arresting people.
Yep.
At any point, the federal government could show up and say, you're in violation of a federal law. What do you think like the owners of these dispensaries would say? But I'm following Colorado law. Who cares? Federal is always supreme to state. So why has this not happened yet? Think about like federal government and their power. Could they just roll in with the FBI whenever they wanted? For that purpose? Yeah, they can. Why haven't they? Yeah, Vince, go ahead.
Because they haven't found the law like to be needed to, or they don't feel the need to enforce that law.
I think that's a good way of putting it. The federal government has said, let's just see what happens with this. It's an old saying that says the states are the laboratories of the federal government. The states get to try things. And maybe the states will come up with some brilliant idea that the federal government will take on. Now, I will tell you, I never thought in my whole life that the federal government would ever actually backtrack on some drug laws and legalize marijuana. But it's starting to be proposed now in the federal government. Now, who knows if it'll gain traction or not, but there are more and more states that are legalizing marijuana, and the federal government is somewhat starting to listen. This gives the states a great deal of autonomy. They can run their own affairs. Now, like I said, number 4 is usually kind of the most complex, because it almost goes against what we know about democracy. For number 4 is limiting majority control. Now, before I get too far, any questions on federalism? Like I said, I thought you guys had heard this before. I know you know a little bit about it. Number 4 is odd, because as we've talked about, if you're in a democracy, ever since you were small children, the saying goes, in a democracy, the majority rules, majority wins. Madison says, yes, majority does win. But we have to be really, really careful. We have to keep most government power out of the hands of the majority. Now, this is very much counterintuitive to what a democracy is. This is why you always have to keep in mind, we're not supposed to be a pure democracy. We are a republic. We choose people to be in positions of power to speak for us. This is where Madison has a difficult time kind of explaining this concept. What he always said is, the mob can be very dangerous. The majority can be very dangerous. We have to be certain that they are controlled in order to protect the minority. We need to be certain that the mob simply doesn't steamroller and take everything away from the minority. Now, I want to just kind of put this in a position here that we were talking about before. If we just had a straight popular vote, just numbers, about redistributing wealth, taking all of Bezos' money and just distributing it amongst us, there would be plenty of people in the majority that would say, yep, I'm okay with that. I need $1 billion from Bezos. I vote to take some of his money away. That's the majority steamroller in the minority. Madison is going to harp on this over and over again, where he says we have to be certain that the minority is protected. We need to put safeguards in place. We need to distance the mob from positions of power. Now, let me tell you this real fast. For the last little chunk, I want to show you this icon that I think does a very good job of kind of visualizing what Madison is saying here, but it takes some explanation. So if you want to redraw this thing in your notes, be my guest. If you just want to add bullet points, I don't care. However you guys want to conceptualize this. This icon right here represents the mass of voters, the American people, all of eligible voting age and requirements. Madison looked at this and said, we have to be very careful because they can turn into the mob. We need to insulate certain levels of government. Now, I want to just do this in order here, because you can see from this icon, you have this line right here going to the presidency. Madison says we need to have a barrier between the mob and the office of the president. What he creates is the Electoral College. Now I gotta ask, have you guys heard of Electoral College before? At least mildly familiar, okay. The Electoral College are the people that actually elect the president. They're the ones that cast their votes. Now here in Colorado, we have 9 electors. Now I'm gonna ask you, do you know why we have 9 electors? Why are we chosen as 9? Say it again, sorry, I'm sorry?
Isn't it based on the population?
It's based on your state's population. You get 1 elector per member of the House. We have 7 members in the House of Representatives, but we also have our 2 senators. You get an elector for every member of Congress your state has. So we're worth 9. Whoever wins the popular vote in Colorado gets all 9 of our electoral votes. It's a winner-take-all state. Now, we're a fairly small state in regards to this. Do you happen to know what's the biggest state in the union? The most populated? California's the one. You know how many electoral votes they have? 55. You win the popular vote in California, you get 55 electoral votes. They're a massive state. Now, here's how this acts as a barrier. When the Constitution was first written, Madison said, those electors are not tied to their states. Those electors can vote for whichever candidate they want. So if the state said overwhelmingly, we want Hillary Clinton to be the next president, the Colorado electors could say, thank you, we don't care. We're going to go vote for Trump. Do we see how that's a barrier between the voters and the office of the presidency? Now, I do need to say this. Today, the electors don't have that choice. Most states have laws on the books that say, however our popular vote goes, you electors have to vote as well. This is how we have the situation that we did in 2016. Hillary Clinton won the overall popular vote by, if I remember correctly, I think it was like right around 2 million votes, and lost because she lost the Electoral College. Do we see how this is a barrier between the voters and the presidency? Okay. I want to do a couple others real fast because this doesn't still exist. Senators are no longer elected by state legislators. They used to be elected by our local Colorado Congress. Now they're just straight elected by the voters. We've done away with this barrier. When the Constitution was written, though, the voters had direct access to members of the House. They just vote for whoever they want to be in the House. Whoever gets the most votes wins. Last one is the judiciary. Where's the line from voters to judiciary? How do you become a member of the judicial branch? Do you know how you get there? You know what it is?
You have to be nominated by the president, and then Congress has to agree with that.
You're so very close. Nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Do voters have any say on who judges are? Basically, no. We choose the president, we choose the Senate, but they get to pick who's in the judiciary. Do we see how these are designed to be barriers? I have good news for you. We're done with those. Put your notebooks away. Now, I know number 4 is complex, and it's a little bit weird. It's different from what we know about democracy. Are we okay with this idea? Okay. Now, here's the thing. I want to do episode 1 with you guys today, and when I see you tomorrow. Because what we're going to start today is going to be the Netflix series of The People versus O.J. Simpson. Now again, I give you guys this because this does such a good job with several areas that we're going to cover. It does such a good job with the legal process, criminal law, civil law, but there are many parts in here that's